to consider the nominations of Ms. Lisa Hershman to be the Chief Management Officer of the Department of Defense, Mr. Dana Deasy to be DOD Chief Information Officer, and Mr. Robert Sander to be General Counsel of the Navy. Thank you for being here today. Ms. Hershman, I know that you've been performing the duties of CMO for almost a year, and Mr. Deasy, you were the first appointed to this position of CIO in May of 2018. So we seem to have a lot of people who are already pretty much on the job here, although the law made it clear that the current incumbent, you in this case, Mr. Deasy, could continue to serve without confirmation, but the President thought you need to be confirmed anyway, and I think we all agree, and I know you do. So we look forward to that. All that to say, Ms. Hershman, and you and Mr. Deasy have extensive experience in the specific positions for which you have been nominated. Mr. Sander, you've been served as the Army's Principal Deputy General Counsel since July of last year, and I'm grateful that you are willing to bring your expertise as a lawyer and counselor and advisor to bear as the Chief Legal Officer of the Navy. We have our standard required questions to ask and answers, and I'm going to ask 8 questions, and if you'd be, all 3 of you would be audible in your answers so we can get you on record. I appreciate it. First of all, have you adhered to the applicable laws and regulations governing conflict of interest?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record in hearings?
Yes.
I just heard 1.
Yes.
Yes.
Very good, very good. Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to the congressional request?
Yes.
Will those witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony and briefings?
Yes.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request before this committee?
Yes.
Do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electronic forms of communications, in a timely manner when requested by a duly constituted committee, or to consult with the committee regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents?
Yes.
And have you assumed any duties or undertaken any actions which would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
No.
We've always said that the world is the most dangerous situation that we've had in our lifetime. The National Defense Strategy makes clear this, the strategic competition with China and Russia, not terrorism, is now the primary national security concern. China and Russia have passed us in key areas and are catching up in other areas. We can no longer take America's military superiority for granted. You know, at one time we were all working on hypersonics, and of course now we see that Beijing just paraded dozens of massive hypersonic missiles, and we haven't even built one ourselves. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. The committee has spent most of its time and effort in the past year ensuring that DOD has the authorities and the resources it needs to implement the 2018 NDS. As senior leaders in the Department of Defense and the Department of Navy, each of you will play a key role in, number 1, building the more lethal force, number 2, strengthening our alliances and building new partners, and in particular, reforming the Department of Defense for greater performance and affordability. You come before this committee at a critical time. We know we have a 2-year budget agreement, and it's going to have to pass the National Defense Authorization Act and the Defense Appropriation Bill to ensure timely funding for the Department of Defense. Now, as soon as we hear from Senator Reed for his opening statement, we'll get to you, Senator Young, for your introduction. Senator Reed.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me join you in welcoming Ms. Hershman, Mr. Deasy, and Mr. Sanders to this morning's hearing. I'd also like to welcome Ms. Hershman's husband, Brant, Mr. Deasy's wife, Carla, as well as Mr. Sanders' family, including his wife, Ingrid, and their son, Javier Hurtado. We are pleased that you all could join us this morning. Ms. Hershman, you are nominated to be the Chief Management Officer, a difficult assignment considering the unique management challenges posed by the Department of Defense. Prior to joining the department, you worked on management reform initiatives in the private sector, and for over a year now, you have focused on instituting management reform in the Pentagon. I hope you will share your plans with the committee on how to reform the department's management processes, including your vision for finding and retaining people with the modern management expertise and skills in fields like data science to work on the huge management challenges in the Department of Defense. Mr. Deasy, you are nominated to be the Chief Information Officer, a position you have held for nearly a year and a half. Prior to serving the department, you served as the CIO for J.P. Morgan Chase, where you managed the bank's investment, information technology, and cybersecurity. The CIO function in the Department of Defense has often been criticized as weak and ineffective, which has led to it being marginalized. I hope that DOD's success in attracting someone of Mr. Deasy's stature and capability to serve as the CIO heralds a new trend for the department. Furthermore, I note that the Secretary of Defense has entrusted Mr. Deasy with many critical responsibilities, such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, network modernization, data strategy, and cybersecurity. I look forward to hearing how you will make sure that all military services are in sync as they develop and adopt new IT systems and capabilities. Mr. Sander, you have been nominated to be the Navy General Counsel. The Navy has not had a Senate-confirmed General Counsel since January 2017. And during that time, the Navy has had to deal with numerous high-profile legal issues. The Navy continues to struggle with the fallout of the Fat Leonard scandal. In addition, the Navy has several high-profile cases involving the Navy SEAL community, raising questions about the ethics and culture of this elite community of warriors. Finally, the McCain and Fitzgerald ship collisions have raised questions about Navy readiness for sustained operations and legal questions about the role and responsibilities of senior Navy officials. These issues will require continuous attention. Finally, the Secretary of the Navy has directed a comprehensive review of the Navy and Marine Corps military legal communities. Although this review has not been directed to examine the Office of the Navy General Counsel, it may assess the relationships and division of duties between the Navy and Marine Corps JAG offices and the Navy General Counsel. If confirmed, Mr. Sander will be called upon to provide his advice on these and other complex legal matters. His experience in the Army General Counsel's office and as an Army Reserve Judge Advocate should equip him well to take on these challenges. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Senator Young, you've requested to introduce Ms. Hershman. You are recognized.
Well, thank you, Chairman Inhofe and Ranking Member Reed and members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. It really is an honor to introduce my friend, Mrs. Lisa Hershman, today. She's joined by her husband, fellow Hoosier, Brandt, and he has been supportive every step of the way. Having served as the acting Chief Management Officer at the Department of Defense for almost the past year, Ms. Hershman likely needs no introduction to the members of this committee. But for those members who have not yet had the privilege of knowing her, Mrs. Hershman is an exceptional leader who served in critical business transformation roles both in and out of government. Following her time in school, where Mrs. Hershman earned a degree in engineering and industrial distribution, she began her career managing a portion of the Seawolf submarine program. From there, Mrs. Hershman went on to work for Avnet, where she oversaw the company's work as a global distributor of electronic components and technology systems. In that capacity, Mrs. Hershman was recognized as the executive in charge of transformation and customer experience in 72 countries. Mrs. Hershman is also the co-author of the internationally acclaimed bestseller book, Faster, Cheaper, Better. This book has been featured in Business Week, Forbes, and Investors Business Daily. She's also served on the Indiana Commission for Women and the Indiana Commission for Higher Education, both important organizations in my state. With her extensive experience, Mrs. Hershman knows that meaningful, lasting change does not occur by fiat, but instead by listening to and empowering others. That mindset will enable her to be effective as she works to improve processes within the department. This is precisely the background of someone who will take on the challenges and opportunities associated with this new position in the department. In the months ahead, I know Mrs. Hershman will work diligently to transform business practices and to find efficiencies, while helping to create a more lethal and effective fighting force. I'm grateful that she has accepted the call to serve our country. She will be a true asset to DOD, to the President, and to our nation. I look forward to supporting her nomination when it arrives on the Senate floor. I thank you again for this opportunity to appear before this committee today, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, Lisa.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman.
Senator Young. Thank you, and you're welcome to leave or stay, your choice.
Thank you. I'll dismount.
Good. All right, we'll now just turn to our opening statements, and we'll just start with you, Ms. Hershman, and work across. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Inhofe, Ranking Member Reed, and members of the committee. It is an honor to be before you today as the President's nominee to be the Chief Management Officer of the Department of Defense. I'd like to thank my husband, Brant, for being here with me today, and to also celebrate the memory of my mother, who passed just 2 weeks ago, as well as my father, who served our nation in the Navy during World War II. He took great pride in fighting for his country, and it is an honor that I offer my service to support our nation's servicemen and women. As an engineer, senior executive, and author, I have focused my career on business transformation and reform in the private sector, driving increased operational efficiencies in a variety of settings, from nonprofit associations to government to household names of the Fortune 100. We know that in order to succeed, companies must be prepared to respond to changing business conditions and global competition while meeting the needs of their customers. While the stakes are very different, responding to changing conditions with agility and an eye towards costs and our global competition is also a key priority of the Department of Defense. The charge of defending our nation's interests while serving the needs of our warfighters is a solemn responsibility, and business reform is an essential component of our future success. The motto of the CMO is efficiency for lethality. It reflects the imperative for our warfighters to be fully prepared to meet and prevail against any threat to our nation's interests throughout the world. In support of that goal, the CMO is tasked to ensure that our resources are utilized as efficiently as possible and that our administrative processes and shared services support our ability to accomplish that mission. Our warfighters rely upon their leadership to prepare and equip them to defend our nation. Too often, they are forced to navigate clumsy and outdated processes and bureaucracy. If I am confirmed, my goal is to institute lasting transformation that becomes an integral part of the culture at the Department of Defense, making it easier for the men and women of our military to perform their mission while ensuring the highest possible value to taxpayers. However, management reform isn't just about saving money. Making our military stronger and more effective will certainly involve a cost-cutting component and will result in cost savings in numerous areas. But it also includes putting in place training and system changes, eliminating redundant systems, maximizing shared service delivery, streamlining business operations, upskilling our workforce, sharing metrics, using data to inform decisions, and leveraging the strength of culture that sustained that transformation for a long time. While these goals of efficiency are similar to those in the private sector, the risks of change are much higher for the military, and the size of the Department of Defense can make the pace of change painfully slow. Nonetheless, I'm encouraged by the progress we have made, with nearly $5 billion in validated savings, as well as increased operational efficiencies, and I am pleased to report that the pace of progress is accelerating. This is due in no small part to the strong message of support we have received from the White House, Secretary Esper, and Deputy Secretary Norquist. That being said, we also recognize that we have much more to accomplish, and if confirmed, I look forward to working with this committee, the Congress, and the administration to achieve these goals. I appreciate your time this morning and look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hershman. Mr. Deasy.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity today to discuss the important work and position of the Department of Defense Chief Information Officer. As you know, I currently serve as the DOD CIO in a non-Senate confirmed capacity. I am honored that the President has nominated me for this position of the now Senate-confirmed DOD CIO, and I'd like to thank Secretary Esper for his continued support. First and foremost, I would like to recognize and thank my wife, Carla. I would not be here today without her support. I received the call to serve while on retirement, hiking in the mountains of North Carolina. As I thought about that decision on that day, it was Carla who reminded me that it had always been my aspiration to serve this great nation. She gets full credit for me being here today. Thank you for your love and amazing support. After almost a year and a half in this position, I can tell you all this was absolutely the right decision. Although this is my first position in government, during my 38-year career, I've had the opportunity to work for some of the most large, complex companies in the world, including building and launching the space shuttle at Rockwell, the automotive industry at General Motors, my international experience at Siemens, the oil and gas sector at BP, and most recently at JP Morgan Chase in financial services. All these positions have one key thing in common: technology is at the heart of their success. My diverse industry experience has been an incredible asset in navigating the complex and dynamics of the Department of Defense. I have been in this role now since May 2018. During this time, the Office of the DOD CIO has accomplished a number of significant achievements in support of the National Defense Strategy. My first priority was building a world-class team within DOD CIO. The new team is now in place and is at the heart of implementing the DOD Digital Modernization Strategy. I am humbled that I've been given this opportunity to lead such a group. The Digital Modernization Strategy advances the NDS vision of leveraging key technologies, specifically cloud, artificial intelligence, command, control, and communications, and cybersecurity. We developed the first cloud strategy to move the department towards an enterprise warfighting cloud. As you may be aware, last week we awarded an enterprise cloud contract to Microsoft. We wrote an AI strategy that outlines 5 pillars critical to accelerating DOD's adoption and integration of AI. We stood up the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center as the focal point to accelerate and scale the fielding of AI across the department. We have developed a comprehensive cybersecurity program that addresses our greatest cyber risk, creates accountability to ensure that improvements are made. Additionally, we have several IT reform efforts underway with the goal of finding cost savings that can be leveraged effectively support the department's mission. Regarding the second line of efforts in the NDS, we continue to strengthen relationships with international, interagency, and industry partners to promote technology collaboration. Finally, we attained the department's highest score ever on the Federal IT Acquisition and Reform Act. Since the day I arrived, my objective has been to ensure our warfighters have the tools they need to fight and win in the great power competition. This drives everything I do. Should I be confirmed, my commitment to the President, the Secretary, to Congress, and to the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and civilians of the Department of Defense will be to implement the Digital Modernization Strategy. This will be critical to supporting the National Defense Strategy by modernizing our digital environment. Technology is foundational to how our warfighters will fight now and in the future. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Deasy. Mr. Sander.
Chairman Inhofe, Ranking Member Reed, and members of the Senate Armed Services Committee, it's an honor and a privilege to appear before you today as the President's nominee for General Counsel of the Navy. Thank you for affording me the opportunity to testify before you today. I'd also like to thank Secretary Esper and Secretary Spencer for their confidence in my abilities to lead the Navy Office of General Counsel. To my family, especially my wife Ingrid, who's a grade school nurse, and our children, Javier, seated behind us, who's a senior this year and is JROTC Battalion Commander. Robert Jr., Heidi, and Johan, thanks for all you do. Like so many other families, especially those with military ties, I know it hasn't always been easy, but I truly appreciate all your love and support. For the past 19 and a half years, I've been fortunate to serve in uniform as a member of the United States Army Reserve Judge Advocate General Corps. I've served with some of the best soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen the world has ever seen. In addition to my JAG Corps experience, I've been fortunate to currently serve in the Army in a civilian capacity as a senior official performing the duties of the Army General Counsel and the Principal Deputy General Counsel of the Army. Hell of our naval service has always been in my DNA. During World War I, my German grandfather was a member of the German Navy. While serving in the war to end all wars, he was captured by the United States and became a prisoner of war. Several years later, he married my grandmother, became a United States citizen, enrolled in the United States Navy, and eventually became a U.S. Merchant Marine and a Master at Arms during World War II, fighting Nazism and fascism. 4 of his sons, including my father, who was a naval fireman on a submarine during World War II, also became members of the greatest generation, to whom all of us are deeply indebted. My family's rich history of service to this great nation has had a profound impact on my life and my worldview. I'm sincerely grateful and humbled at the chance to continue my service in this meaningful way. Secretary Spencer has established 3 priorities focusing on people, capabilities, and processes in order to ensure current and future mission success. If confirmed, I will assist Secretary Spencer and the Navy and Marine Corps leadership in taking care of our service members, their families, the civilian workforce, and our retirees. After all, people are the Navy and Marine Corps' greatest and most treasured resource. As we prepare for future conflicts, the Navy and Marine Corps must be capable of providing maritime dominance and power projection around the globe. If confirmed, I will assist the Navy and Marine Corps leadership with improving readiness, lethality, and modernization across the Navy and Marine Corps so that our nation maintains the advantage and sets the conditions in this great power competition with Russia and China. The Navy must continue to improve our processes to meet current and future challenges. In light of future budget constraints and uncertainty, we must maximize the use of every dollar. If confirmed, I will continue to assist the Navy and Marine Corps leadership with building upon the reform agenda that has already begun. As a department's chief legal officer, I will be responsible for leading a talented group of attorneys and professional support staff through both the Navy and the Marine Corps. If confirmed to be the Navy General Counsel, I, along with my partners in the law firm called Navy Law, Vice Admiral John Hannock, who's the Navy Judge Advocate General, and Major General Dan Lecce, who's a Staff Judge Advocate to the Commandant of the Marine Corps, will ensure that our legal team is proactive and engaged with our clients. I'll also commit ensuring that our legal team zealously follows and enforces the United States Constitution and all other laws. I further promise, if confirmed, that our legal team will tirelessly support the total military force, their families, the civilian workforce, and our retirees. And finally, I will hold myself, my colleagues, and my legal team to the highest of ethical standards. After all, the American people deserve nothing less. In closing, I'm honored and humbled to have been nominated by the President as the Navy General Counsel and grateful for your consideration of my nomination. And I look forward to your questions. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sander. I appreciate the fact that all 3 of you in your initial documents that you supplied to this committee were very complimentary of this document here, this the National Defense Strategy Commission. It's something we've complimented for quite a period of time. It's equal Democrats and Republicans putting it together, and it has the recommendations. We've been adhering to these recommendations ever since this report came out. Ms. Hershman, in the NDS, it outlines 3 lines of efforts to generate decisive and sustained U.S. military advantage. One of those 3 is often underappreciated and is reforming the department for greater performance and affordability. What is the CMO's role in contribution to the NDS?
Senator, under Title 10, 132A in particular, it outlines the role of the CMO, and part of my many duties include driving the business operations of the department. That's looking for efficiency, effectiveness, undoing duplication, finding reform, driving reform, also making good use of shared services, having direction, authority, and control over what's called the fourth estate, which is 28 defense agencies and field activities, plus the joint staff, plus OSD. And so part of my role in support of the Deputy Secretary, as well as the Secretary, as a principal advisor to them, is to find areas where we can seek efficiencies, effectiveness, and not hamper our lethality and readiness. And to that end, I support much of line of effort 3 as well as line of effort 1 of the NDS.
Good, because that's not talked about as much as some of the other areas. And Mr. Deasy, in the years I've been on this committee, I don't remember anyone having the rounded experience and background that you've had, and not just the obvious thing as the CIO of J.P. Morgan Chase, but also with BP, General Motors, Tyco, Siemens. So you've done it all. And I just have to ask the question, you've been exposed now to this job. What is it about it you're willing to continue on with all this background that you bring to the table?
You know, this started about 3 years ago when I had a chance while at J.P. Morgan to host all the agency CIOs and Department of Defense CIOs. And I remember that day, Senator, when I went home and spoke to my wife, I said, you know, the missions that they described to me, the challenges they face, just are enormous. And I remember saying to her at the time, I said, I wish someday there was a chance that I could help in some capacity. So when I got the call that as to come and serve, you know, as I pointed out in my opening remarks, Carla was very quick to point out this was your opportunity. I have to tell you, since arriving, there's not a day that goes by when I walk the hallways of the Pentagon and you see the young men and the women, and you really do feel a sense of accountability on your shoulders that you have to deliver, you have to deal with the concerns and the challenges they face. And I feel very honored to have this. I'm very committed to doing this, and I'd rather be no other place than here right now, Senator.
Well, that's the kind of answer you hope for, that people out there in the real world are wanting to pay back a little bit. We appreciate it very much. Mr. Sander, they'd say the same thing with your background, the things that you referred to, what the first steps that you'll take, but you didn't outline what those steps would be. What would be the first thing you're anxious to get involved in?
Senator, the first thing that I need to do is build relationships within the Navy. There will be relationship building between the Navy, Secretary of the Navy, the Assistant Secretaries, and also the senior leadership in the Navy and the Marine Corps. They have a lot of issues right now dealing legal issues, as you outlined in your opening statement, as well as Senator Reid did. And I need to get a better look on how we can best address those for the future of the Department of Navy. Our sailors and the taxpayers deserve nothing less.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And the fact that all three of you have recognized that we've slipped a little bit when I talked about hypersonics and how we were ahead at one time, and right now we've fallen behind. And you know, when you talk to the American people, they assume that we have the best of everything. The three of you know that we don't right now, but we will with your service. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Deasy, as you indicated last Friday evening, the Jedi Cloud account was awarded. It has not been done without some controversy. Going back many months ago, it's been reported that the President called then Secretary Mattis and suggested that the Jedi competition be looked at closely. July, he said he'd take a very strong look at it himself after seeing here complaining from different companies. The importance of this contract, as you very specifically and eloquently stated, is so critical to our national security that it has to be beyond any type of political engagement. It has to be done right down the middle. Can you describe the steps that you and others in the department took to ensure that the Jedi Cloud computing competition was not subject to political influence by the White House or anyone within the Pentagon?
Yes, I can. So when I arrived, Senator, there was two initial things that I did. One was to step back, look at the strategy. How was JEDI going to fit into that strategy? How was the RFP being constructed? What was the nature of what we were asking for the offers to produce? The next thing we did was after we submitted the RFP, we took the team of individuals. We went out and found approximately 50 government civilian servants that were experts in cloud computing, and we compartmentalized them, and we segregated them into teams. At no time did one team have access to what the other team was working on. And probably the most important thing we did was the third step, and that was we have kept the identity of every member of the source selection team anonymous throughout this process. Finally, in my discussions that I've had with the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Defense, at no time throughout this process have I ever shared any proprietary source information with them, nor have I ever divulged when we got to the conclusion who the awardee was.
Thank you. Just following up, are you aware of that any officials from the White House Department tried to contact or did contact any of the source selection officials, the team members?
To the best of my knowledge, nobody has contacted from the White House any members of the source selection team.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hershman, as we've all indicated, you have a very challenging job. And one of the challenges is to maintain, not only maintain, but enhance the civilian workforce of the Department of Defense. Can you give us any ideas that you have now how we can attract and retain capable civilian management personnel?
I do. I've experienced this myself in my role as either the DCMO or the acting CMO, in that I was given the new directorate to manage the Chief Data Officer. We had some challenges with hiring and attracting data scientists because much of the private sector is also looking for the same type of people. So a couple of things that we did. Number one, we found that especially those in mid-career are looking for something more challenging. And having the ability to speak at several conferences where these folks are attending, I said to them, if you're looking for a large, complicated project that really wants to stretch your abilities, come to the Department of Defense. We have them in spades. And it was actually quite intriguing for them. We've also looked internally and have some very, very sharp, capable individuals that not only had the skill set from a data management standpoint, but also aligned with some of our reform initiatives. We have folks that have a background not only in data science, but also in readiness. We even have a young man that's working for us whose father worked in DECA, and so understanding commissaries and exchanges. And finally, we turned to our Defense Business Board, and we held a panel of those in industry and said, how are you recruiting, and how can we get in on this? And specific to data scientists, we learned that many are now going after mathematicians, those that have the skills, but we can give them training while they're on site. So we attract them from something new and something different from outside of what they're currently working in the private sector. We're seeking public-private partnerships. I've actually entertained internships. Those are some of the ways that we're putting in, some of the methods we're putting in place to attract talent.
Thank you very much. My time expired, Mr. Sander, but I'm sure an Army lawyer can be capable of discharging these duties. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hershman, I'm one of a bipartisan group of 23 senators and 42 members of the House that have asked the Secretary of Defense to test a solution to improve access to retail pharmacies in the TRICARE program for those beneficiaries who rely on brand-name maintenance medications. The bottom line is that right now, if you're in a rural area, you have to either travel to an MTF, a facility, a military facility, or you have to use the mail order processes in place. What's been left out is local retailers. Local retailers have the retail pharmacies. In a lot of the rural areas, they would be the easiest and the ones with a professional on hand in order to help these beneficiaries of TRICARE. My question to you is there has been a test pilot or a pilot program which has been developed these retailers would like an opportunity to have that pilot project tested and to be able to provide those local services. Will you take a look at that test program, that pilot program, and would you work with us to be able to provide those services in those rural areas?
I would be more than delighted to work with you and look at that test pilot. Yes, sir.
Thank you. We've had some real leadership in this particular area under both undersecretaries for personnel and readiness, from Robert Wilkie to Stephanie Barnett to James Stewart. We've even seen the pharmaceutical retailers offer this pilot program that has addressed a lot of what pharma's concerns were. So if you would, please, I think this is a step in the right direction, and I think with a little bit more of a push from the top, we might be able to help a lot of families out there that have been limited to the professional expertise that they could get if they had the local retail pharmacy helping them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Deasy, I most certainly appreciate this opportunity to have you share a little bit about what's going on in the Department of Defense with regard to JEDI and a little bit about your concerns with regard to how we move into a cloud computing future. Can you talk a little bit, just so that perhaps we understand a little bit better, what we're really talking about is a concept in which we have a single concept or a single approach to being able to share information from one system to another. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges right now and the way that we have multiple systems out there that don't talk to one another within the Department of Defense? You might want to turn your system on there.
Yes, Senator. One of the things I will point out was when the digital modernization was put together, somebody once asked me, why is cloud the first of the 4 parts of the digital modernization? I've always said, cloud is the foundation of which everything else rides on top of. If we don't get a right enterprise cloud in place, our ability to do advanced machine learning, artificial intelligence, next generation command and control and communications, and secure the department in a different way will be very challenging. To the question you raised about what is the environment today, today we have a multitude of clouds. We are not short, Senator, on the number of clouds and the types of clouds we have. All these clouds were built over the years in very disparate, siloed manners. I had a chance about 2 months ago to go to Afghanistan and to actually visit the troops and watch how operations occurred. And there were some aspects of that were very inspirational that day, and there were some things that were really quite discouraging. When you saw an operator and how they have to do their job, where they had to go to one system to get the information they needed to do about what was the adversary they were looking at on the screen, the next system they had to go to decide what actions to take, and then finally a third system they might approach to as to where our assets were on the ground. There was a lot of movement, a lot of disparate, and it was it screamed out at me on that day that we are doing absolutely the right thing by putting in a single cloud that integrates our unclassified data, our secret data, and our top secret data. But most importantly, it's getting that data from that cloud out to the tactical edge.
But when you say that now, and this is the part that I think is really important, can you talk a little bit about the fact that that data remains secret at the secret level, top secret at the top secret level, and what you've really talked about here is the protocols necessary for that communication to occur. It's important that I think the public understand we're not giving people access to secret data because we have everything on one so-called network. Talk about that a little bit, please.
Yes, Senator, you are absolutely correct. One of the uniquenesses of this environment that we've created is what's called multi-domain data classes, the idea that we keep unclassified data segregated from classified data all the way up to top secret data. But it's done in a way that allows the warfighter to access what they need from an unclassified all the way to a top secret in an integrated, interoperable manner.
Thank you. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rounds. We have a quorum right now, so I ask the committee to consider a list of 1,780 pending military nominations. All of these nominations have been before the committee the required length of time. Is there a motion to favorably report this list of 1,780 pending military nominations to the Senate?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sander, I appreciated your testimony, both written and oral. Quote, I further promise, if confirmed, that our legal team will tirelessly support the total military force, their families, the civilian workforce, and our retirees. I want to ask you about an issue of deep importance to military families. There is a program called the Exceptional Family Member Program, and this is a program for military families who have dependents with disabilities. There's about 132,000 military families that are enrolled in that program because they have a child with a disability. The GAO did a report of the program in 2012, finding huge gaps in the military support for these families. The GAO did a report in 2018 and found exactly the same thing. In fact, found that almost all of the recommendations made to the Department of Defense in 2012 had not been complied with. One of the requirements of the program is that any military family that is enrolled in this program have a sort of designed plan, sort of like an IEP, individualized education plan, within public schools to try to make sure that the family member with a disability is receiving the services that they need. The 2018 GAO report found that there were only 6,000 such plans, even though there were 132,000 family members enrolled in the program. Recent press has disclosed that one of the issues that creates challenge for families is if the children are enrolled in local public school systems and they're attempting to receive special education services, there is a real variation among the service branches in terms of the support given to family members. The Marines provide the family member support as they're dealing with the local school systems to try to get the best program for their child. The Navy does not. I wanted to ask you, would you take a look at the program, this EFMP program, should you be confirmed, and try to make sure that what you've committed to in your testimony, that family members are supported, is actually happening in the Navy, namely that Navy families that are enrolled in the program receive the plan that they're supposed to receive, and that they also receive help in dealing with local school systems as they advocate for their children.
Yes, Senator, I'll be glad to take a look at that. As I mentioned earlier, my wife is a school nurse. I also have 2 sisters that are DOD teachers as well.
Yep.
So taking care of our families and their children and their dependents is a high priority for me. I think it also comes down to readiness, so we need to make sure that our sailors, soldiers, Marine, and airmen know that their families are taken care of, so when they're acting on behalf of this nation, they're not worried about what's waiting at home and what might go wrong.
The only challenge here is not just with the Navy. Every branch has its own, standard of whether nobody's meeting the standard fully. But should you be confirmed, I'd like to follow up with you on this matter to see what the Navy is doing to support these families.
Absolutely, Senator.
Great, thank you. Ms. Hershman, I would like to ask you, in your current role, but especially in your future role, should you be confirmed, how do you use or plan to use the audit mandated by Congress of the DOD to not only find dollar efficiencies, but also find effectiveness improvements?
So you probably saw the reaction on my face. I smiled when I heard the word audit.
Yes, I did. You almost jumped out of your chair.
Probably a little rare for most people. My father was an accountant, so I think he's very proud of me right now. I was early on, when I started at the Department of Defense, I made a point to get to know Mr. Norquist in his role as the comptroller for a couple of reasons. One, I knew that having the comptroller as a partner to CMO, whether it be reform or managing data, et cetera, it was going to be important. The CMO early on advocated for being a partner in sponsoring the audit. One of the key outputs of that audit is the data. We have developed, my data science team, along with comptroller folks, have developed a tool called Advana, in which we are using a repository to gather that information. It has already given us information that is very vital to my role. I say to folks that I use the audit to inform reform, because from that data, I can tell what are systemic issues pervasive throughout the organization and what might be an anomaly. I want to focus on those systemic issues, in that in the 5 categories from the audit, 94% of the findings came from 3 areas. I know that's where I need to point and look for lasting change.
And I would like just to underline this, having insisted upon the audit and finally insisted that the long-ago required audit actually be done by the DOD. This committee is very focused on the audit. We don't want to just use it for our oversight. If that's all it does, it's not effective. The real issue is, will you use it internally, and not just use it to solve, financial challenges. Sometimes people look at audits as kind of a financial correction mechanism, but to find patterns, as you suggest, to figure out ways to not simply save money, but I think your motto was, efficiency to improve lethality, not just to save money, but also to improve the effectiveness of the program. So if you would, just consider this, and you might say the same thing to Mr. Norquist. When you're back before the committee, we're likely to always ask you, what are some success stories from the audit? What are things that you've learned in the audit? How have you saved money? How have you improved the effectiveness? Because then we'll know that it wasn't just our requirement, but that the DOD culture is also embracing the notion of continuous improvement that an audit can help you achieve. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to each of you for being here this morning. Ms. Hershman, I want to continue basically where Senator Kane was moving, talking about these deliverables that are so necessary. And in the 2019 NDAA, you are tasked with reducing covered activities and contracting 25%. And the first benchmark was an initial plan, but that arrived from your office a couple of months late. And GAO's review of that document was not a favorable review and left a lot of questions that were out there. And their comment was that it was difficult to assess the feasibility of future reforms based on what you delivered for them. The second report was due at the beginning of this month. And the reforms identified came in at 5% across the baseline instead of the 25% that you have been mandated to meet. So we've got two timelines and two sets of deliverables that have been missed in this process so far. And we're looking at January, where there is another report that is due. So I want you to lay out for the committee how you are approaching this report in January. What are the deliverables and the savings that you have identified? How are you going to reduce those covered activities like services contracting and real estate management so that you are going to hit that target, because this fourth estate reform is vital to effectiveness and efficiency, and as you say, keeping that focus on lethality.
Senator, in that report, the 25% target also included the statement that if it would be injurious or inefficient to meet that 25% target, please state why. And the timeline for meeting that target was within one fiscal year. And across all of the fourth estate, the average came out to be about 5%. However, within that, and this came largely from Ranking Member Thornberry and his legislation, and I've had conversations with Ranking Member Thornberry on this, and some of the things we discussed was a focus on the fourth estate, and particularly baselining within organizations like Washington Headquarters Services. Some of the things that we are doing within my own directorate with regard to, say, civilian management, which is one of the covered areas, we actually have a target of 30% in the fiscal year.
And do you have a timeline for meeting that target?
Yes.
With set deliverables
Yes.
that are attainable?
We do.
Okay.
And
because we all know that within DOD there is a lot of waste. And there, pardon me, is a tremendous amount of utilization, pardon me, not utilization, but a tremendous amount of focus on processes that have outlived their usefulness.
You're right.
That is incredibly frustrating to those of us that have military posts that we have represented. And when I talk to men and women at Fort Campbell, and they say, well, this is what we're doing, but this is what we would like to do in order to be more productive, to be more accurate, to be more efficient, to fight 21st century warfare, to move on and utilize technology and 5G, and there is a host of waste. So if you are confirmed, I think it is imperative that you begin to hit your deadlines. And we want to be here to make certain that you hit those deadlines. I've got just a couple of seconds left. Mr. Deasy, thank you for the conversation. Enjoyed it tremendously, and we want to make certain that you continue to use your private sector expertise in order to be certain that DOD is recruiting the talent that is going to be necessary to look at next generation warfare. And as we discussed, sometimes it is difficult to retain these individuals because the private sector is going to pay them a lot more than the federal government. And I thank you and your family for your willingness to step away from that private sector career and to focus on the federal government. I thank each of you for that and for being here. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for your service and your family support. Ms. Hershman, when I first came to the Senate in November 2010, I could not believe that the Department of Defense is the only agency that we had that we never audited. There was no sense of this whatsoever, and didn't make any sense to me. So in 2012, I worked with Audit the Pentagon Bill with Tom Coburn at that time from Oklahoma, and we created the office that you feel right now. So I'm happy to see you here. In your written statement, you mentioned that the motto for this Chief Management Office is efficiency for lethality, for lethalness. So in the work that you've done thus far in the role, do you have an example of a fix in your office that has made this, has concretely improved the readiness and capability for our warfighters?
First of all, Senator, thank you for your contribution for this role. I appreciate it. And yes, it's needed. When I look at the data that tells us how many systems we have and so forth, it's a little bit staggering, so I thank you. Yes, in the past year, we have worked on a variety of issues. One in particular that has a direct impact on readiness is in our logistics and supply chain management. And we have had a variety of opportunities, and actually, as Senator was just talking about, one of the 4 covered areas where they are looking at furthering the efficiencies, we're looking at demand management, we're looking at how we buy goods and services to make them available, goods in particular available for things like spares and spare parts for repairs.
Are you putting best practices, basically what's being done in the private sector too, that you see the most effective or most efficient companies?
Yes, we have. In fact, we've benchmarked several, and we're looking at it not just within the Defense Logistics Agency, but we're taking an end-to-end perspective, because what we're finding is that the way we order our parts has an impact to the delivery of the service and, frankly, the carrying costs as we keep them in inventory.
Thank you. Mr. Deasy, as being a ranking member on cybersecurity for the armed services, I'm very much concerned of how we hold our contractors responsible, because I'm finding out that back channels coming up through the subcontractors is where a lot of espionage has been going on. So the financial penalties we're trying to put, and I think it's important for us to put very, very severe financial penalties on the prime contractors who are not basically overseeing the security information. What's your thoughts on that, and are you moving in that direction whatsoever? Do you think we should implement that, or what's your feelings?
So specifically, I have not spent time on the financial impact part of this.
You know what we're talking about there, don't you?
I know what you're talking about. What I can say, and I do completely agree that we need to have changes. We need to make an intervention here. What we can't lose in this conversation, if you look at all the data breaches that we've had and I've gone back and I've studied these. At the heart of this is not necessarily the Tier 1 suppliers, but as you pointed out, you get down to Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4.
That's where most of it's happening.
That's where the vulnerabilities are. And I think there's a few things we have to do. One of the things we have to do is we have to move away from this self-assessment approach that our suppliers do today. And I think we're going to have to move to an independent assessment approach where we can get an...
Are you all moving, or do you have support to do that?
There's support on that, and a matter of fact, there will be activity coming out of Ellen Lord's Acquisition Sustainment Organization starting next year.
But sir, if a Tier 1's not held responsible at all, and then they won't, they're not basically sharing information because they're afraid that then the Tier 1 will take it and run with it and not need a Tier 3, Tier 4. We've got serious problems there. But someone's about to be held accountable for this all the way down the food chain. And that's where you're going to have to step in. But we're talking about legislation that would hold the primes responsible for their subs all the way down the line. And I think that only makes common sense for the security of our nation.
So what I would like to do, Senator, on this matter is go back and have a discussion with ANS on this.
I would hope you would maybe get back to us as quick. I have one more question to ask you, sir.
I'd be happy to get back.
In your statement, you mentioned something that you were proud of in DOD's artificial intelligence, AI, strategy and standing up of the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. And as you're concerned, as I am, about China's ambition that they are aware that they have been doing to be a goal of being the dominant country in artificial intelligence by 2030. Do you think these steps are meaningful enough to get the United States to a place where we can prevent China from being the leading power in AI?
Senator, I do, but I believe we're going to have to continue to move with more urgency in this matter.
Is there enough concern at your level, people coming to you that you report to or report to you?
Yes, we have. This particular topic is a regular topic that has occurred with the Secretary, the Deputy Secretary, the chiefs, and all the secretaries of the service.
Everybody understands the advancement that China's already made and how rapidly they're moving forward?
Yes, they do, and they tasked me quite strongly to be able to show evidence that we are moving ahead aggressively with the fielding of AI.
And maybe on a secured meeting, a secured skiff, we can get a little bit more info on what you are doing in order to combat this.
If confirmed, Senator, I'd be happy to come over and talk with you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here today. First, Mr. Deasy, I want to maybe just make an encouragement, if you will. I know you're probably all familiar with the fact that Grand Forks Air Force Base recently was named a Global Hawk base. Of course, it's had Global Hawks for some time, but now a reconnaissance wing. The Grand Forks Air Force Base, once a large tanker and bomber base, leased out a good chunk of that base to the county, who then leased it out to the Grand Sky UAV Park. Our North Dakota Army National Guard, or Air National Guard, I'm sorry, has an ISR mission. The result of that, of course, has been the spawning of incredible research and development and intellectual assets, including the University of North Dakota's Aerospace School, AI Research and Development. They're a company in Fargo, a number of companies. A company in Fargo recently met with some of the folks over at DOD and NASA, a company that does AI research and development called Aperio. I say all that only as a reminder and an encouragement perhaps to everyone listening, but particularly to you, that not all the great new ideas are in the Silicon Valley. And I just would love to encourage you to keep all of that in mind, not just North Dakota, but throughout America, that there are a lot of startups and innovators that oftentimes get left behind as a result of whether it's procurement, and we'll talk about that next, Ms. Hershman, or other policies, or even just traditions and relationships, and maybe give you a minute or two to respond to that thought and that encouragement.
Senator, I completely agree. When we established the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, one of the foundational principles was talent and where we should go out in industry to seek this. We're developing expertise inside the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center right now that is not only working with large, significant defense players that we have today, we're working with the academic environment, we're working with research institutes, and yes, we are also working everywhere from startups to the established companies in Silicon Valley. One thing for sure about the AI space, if you look at any of the solutions that we've started to roll out today, there's not one or two companies it takes to come up with these solutions, but there's a host of them. And some of these, we may have 6 or 7 companies from well-established to small startups that participate in actually helping to develop a solution.
All right, thank you for that, and I want to continue to encourage you in that. Ms. Hershman, I just want to visit a little bit. Thank you, by the way, for our very good conversation. I was encouraged, and I'm not an auditor and accountant at all, but it does make me happy to see you happy when you hear the word audit, because we have some issues that we need to deal with. But when we met a few months ago, I talked to you about speaking of procurement, the procurement process at the Army Corps of Engineers, particularly as it relates to the building of the wall on the southern border, and I've been concerned about it as a result of a constituent that's in that process, but I've learned a lot more. And recently I've learned a whole lot more because I've gotten a whole lot more information, which was far too difficult to get, I might add. But now that I have, one of the things I've noticed is that the Corps uses this 2-tier process where they first put out a very small number of RFPs to a very small group of builders, quite select, and then and that's irrespective of price or efficiency or anything like that, just design build. Then in the second round, they'll invite like one company to the table, and then they'll negotiate price. And it concerns me a lot that there's such a small group and a very selective process that gets down to just basically a sole source. And I find it hard to imagine that we are getting the best bang for the buck in that type of a process. So I just want to encourage you as well and get your feedback on some possible reforms. And I know that's just one example of one. I'm sure it's applicable in several areas, but just want to encourage you.
Thank you, Senator. And I appreciated our conversation as we spoke. Even the way we scope the outcomes of these contracts can be so narrow and predetermined that we may be overlooking innovative ways to attack a problem. As we mentioned, category management and contract management is one of our largest focus areas for reform. We have 40,000 contracting officers and over 2,000 contracting offices. It is ripe for reform from a process standpoint, from a vendor selection standpoint, from an end-to-end standpoint, and looking at enterprise-wide buys are all part of our reform initiatives, particular to contracts. So I appreciate your ongoing continued encouragement and support.
Thank you. Thank all of you for your willingness to step up and yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask the following two questions of every nominee who comes before any of the committees on which I sit. So these are the questions, and I'll start with you, Ms. Hershman, and we'll just go down the line. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
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 Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
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 Question for Mr. Deasy. You've been asked several questions about the JEDI contract. What's the vulnerability of having top secret classified and unclassified data in one system with one provider?
When we kicked off the JEDI program and we're considering having an environment that was going to hold unclassified all the way to top secret, one of the first things we did was we went to the experts that actually deal with how our adversary thinks about accessing our environments. So we had in-depth technical conversations with the CIA as well as the NSA. This was one of the great things I had access to when I joined the Department of Defense. We've actually asked them to help us architect in our RFP how we expected our suppliers to ensure that our very classifications of data were secured, segregated, and protected. And in doing that, when we actually now have moved past award, we will be using the services of the NSA to do what we call penetration testing. This will be a series of ongoing testing where they will act like an adversary and they will attempt to try to access each of those classifications of data.
Thank you. So you're assuring us that even if we just have one provider, that you've pretty much eliminated the vulnerability of just having one provider. I have a question for Mr. Sander. The Navy and Marine Corps have launched reviews into the state of their legal communities, and the review is focused on leadership and performance in the legal communities of both services to ensure that they are properly organized, staffed, trained, and equipped to perform their missions. This review comes as a result of ongoing legal issues highlighted by the recent acquittal of SEAL Special Warfare Operator Chief Edward Gallagher for war crime charges and meddling by a top Navy officer, a lawyer, into another case against a different SEAL. What will be your role if you are confirmed in this review process?
Senator, I'm generally aware of the comprehensive review, and it is focusing on the uniform side of the House for the Navy first, and then Secretary Spencer added it to the Marine side of the House in the uniform. I don't know what the specific role is for the Navy General Counsel as laid out by Secretary Spencer in those appointment documents. However, if confirmed, I will hopefully be on board to guide Secretary Spencer in the legal nuances of the whole review, and would work alongside the Navy Judge Advocate General as well as SJ to the Commandant on how we can best effectuate change and improve conditions within our Navy legal family.
Because you testified that you are committed to upholding the highest ethical standards. Will you protect Navy career lawyers so that they can provide nonpartisan legal advice?
Absolutely, Senator. As long as they're doing their job, they should be protected fully.
This committee has focused on the scourge of sexual assault and retaliation in all of our services. Are you going to be involved in any aspects of attacking this continuing scourge of sexual assault in the military and retaliation? Particularly with regard to the Navy, of course.
Senator, absolutely. I think every member of the Defense Department should be involved. If we don't change culture, we're not going to address the problem. And we have to make sure that we protect those that protect the nation. As you know, victims of sexual assault carry with that the consequences of those actions for years to come, far after their military services ended. And we need to make sure that we address it, we attack the problem head on, and we do our best.
So I would be interested in following up with you as to exactly what you intend to do to address this continuing problem. Now, I have a question for you regarding transgender troops. And President Trump implemented a transgender military policy that prevents individuals who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, from joining the military. I want to ask, if transgender individuals were permitted to serve, do you believe that there would be a negative impact on military readiness or the ability to complete missions?
Senator, transgender individuals are currently serving in the military. Under the 2019, they call it the MADIS policy. If you're gender dysphoria free for 36 months, you would be accessed or accepted into the military. And even if you don't have those 36 months, you can always request an exception to policy. So transgender individuals are currently serving. They will continue to serve.
So basically, you're saying there's nothing inherent in their transgender status that would make it difficult for them to complete their missions or to serve in the military. That's what you're saying? No,
Senator, it's not the fact that they identify as a transgender. It's a standards-based policy.
Yes. Okay, so there are a lot of us who believe that that particular policy serves no purpose except to discriminate against these people. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank the nominees for their service to our country they're already doing, but their desire to serve in these important positions, and your families. It's a team effort, and I think we all know that and sometimes don't recognize how important our families are in all this. So thank you to the families as well. I want to first just get a commitment. There's a lot of things happening in my state, great state of Alaska, whether it's the new interest in the Arctic, in terms of national security, missile defense, fifth-gen fighters being stationed there. I'd like all of you to not only have an invite, but a commitment to say yes to the invite to come up to Alaska and see what's happening in Alaska. Can I get that commitment? If confirmed, you'll come on up to my state.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Senator.
Including maybe even in the winter?
I would like to return. My experience so far has been wonderful.
Great, thank you. So, Ms. Hershman, I want to follow on what Senator Kramer was talking a little bit about. You know, big states like ours and his that aren't necessarily very populated relative to other states do have a lot of opportunities and good ideas for our defense establishment. I'll just give you an example. There was a company in the Matsu Valley in Alaska that creates an incredible product. It's hard to describe, but it's kind of like a Zamboni for aircraft carriers to make sure the carriers are Marine Corps amphibious assault ships are very, very clean with regard to their deck, so it doesn't hurt our 5th-gen fighters. These guys are very innovative. They're working hard. I went out to visit them recently. They did mention to me that a contracting officer somewhere in the bowels of DOD said, hey, if you want to keep this relationship going, you might want to think about relocating your manufacturing facilities to the lower 48 because it's easier for us. So can I get your commitment to make sure whoever the heck is doing that kind of stuff needs to be weeded out, told we want diversification throughout the entire country, and we have great companies, whether in North Dakota or Alaska, that they should not be getting the message from contracting officers in DOD that, hey, if you want to keep these contracts, you might want to think about relocating. That's unacceptable. Can I get your commitment to make sure that we're not doing that at all?
Yes, Senator. You have
And
my
just
commitment.
please send that message throughout the enterprise that that's probably illegal, but also just not smart.
I will do that. I will use it as an example.
Thank you. I've raised that with the SecNav already, and he had a similar reaction that you did. You know, I want to talk a little bit about, again, Ms. Hershman, acquisition reform. I think you all know the history. You look at something like the SR-71, I think it was designed and launched within 18 months, kind of with slide rules, and that was a spy plane that lasted 4 decades. And then we go to the F-35 that took 20 years to field. Senator Tillis, if he were here, I'm sure would put his 400-page RFP for the NATO Next Generation pistol handgun, 450 pages of red tape. How can we get to the bottom of this issue of our acquisition program, which is, I think, broken? We're trying to do reforms here. You mentioned that CMO is not resourced enough, but what more can we be looking at? And I really want to encourage all of you, if you have ideas on major acquisition reform, you need to make sure we understand what those are and you know, hopefully can try to pass them. What are your thoughts on that?
Certainly, Senator. This is from a private sector example, taking a page from McDonald's, who is very good at managing and acquiring goods and services by category. So we have a large DOD-wide category management reform initiative underway. We are looking at everything from how many contracts we have for certain goods and services. I'll give you an example. We had 22 contracts for 2x4s. We actually buy a lot of 2x4s in the DOD. Here's the problem. We found that amongst those 22, several of the contracts were from the same vendor at different price points.
Yeah.
We necked it down to 2 contracts, $18 million savings, which seems small, but when you have 40,000 contracting officers, those small items start to add up very quickly.
Well, we want to, I have one more question, so I don't want to interrupt, but we want to work with you on major acquisition reform. I think the President's put together a good team in terms of serious, but we need your big ideas to help move this so it doesn't take 20 more years to field an F-35. Mr. Deasy, real quick final question. Companies like Google, right, who decided that they don't want to participate with regard to Project Maven, a DOD project that dealt with AI and other issues. You know, we've had hearings on the Commerce Committee where, you know, I've said, that's fine, this is America, you don't have to deal with the Pentagon. But when companies like that, which are very sophisticated, then go to start looking at doing work for China, communist China, then I think we all should have a concern about that. How should we as the Congress deal with these kind of companies say, hey, we don't want to do work with the Pentagon, fine, on sophisticated issues, AI, but we're going to go over and do work with the Communist Chinese Party, which is certainly, in my view, our adversary. What should we be doing? How should Congress be thinking about addressing this?
Yes, I think this question of Google is much broader than just Google. I mean, if you look at any large of the cloud providers, the AI providers, in any large company that the Department of Defense does business with today, they have activity that they are doing over in China. It's been my view from the beginning, just using the Google as an example, that we need to be much more thoughtful in how we write our contract language, how we put our intellectual property language into contracts that ensure us that when any of these large companies are going to have a relationship in China, that we have complete segregation, firewall off requirements as far as the data, the proprietary systems and solutions they create for us. I think the help that we can have from Congress is ensuring that from an acquisition standpoint that we continue to have very smart acquisitions on how we create those firewalls.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Deasy, President Trump's antipathy to Amazon is well known. It's been reported that even in the summer of 2018, he instructed General Mattis to, quote, screw Amazon out of the opportunity to bid on this contract. And there are many other statements about Amazon and Jeff Bezos. Can you categorically assure us that there was no influence by the White House or the President on the ultimate disposition of this contract? And I want you to think hard about that answer.
Sir, I can tell you that the way we organized the team, kept the anonymity of the team, the compartmentalization of the team, that I feel very confident that at no time were team members that actually took the source selection were influenced with any external, including the White House.
And those team members were the ones who actually made the final decision, or did they make a recommendation to the Secretary, for example?
No, sir, they actually make the final decision, and then they bring that decision to me. I have a chance to ask them questions about it, and then all I do is take that final acquisition decision and inform the deputy and inform the Secretary of the decision taken.
And the final decision by those panels was to award the contract to Microsoft?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. I want to talk to you about the defense network and cyber attacks. How often are you attacked? Are your systems pinged by any outside interest?
Sir, the pings total hundreds of millions a month. This is a constant adversarial approach that they will continuously look at any point of entry inside the Department of Defense, and they will daily try new tactics and techniques through those points of entries to ping us.
I think for context, the public should know that that's the common experience of any large enterprise. I spoke to a utility recently, 3 million a day was their number. So the point is you're being attacked regularly. Do you red team your networks in order to ensure their security? Do you have people whose job it is to try to penetrate the networks and to determine where the vulnerabilities are?
So, sir, what I have is a relationship that exists between the DOD, DISA, my office, and U.S. Cyber Command. And here's how it works in practice. So it's my responsibility to look at where the vulnerabilities exist and issue directives and tasking to the services to fix those vulnerabilities. I use the services of U.S. Cyber Command under General Nakasone and his teams to go in, look at our networks, as you say, attack them from like an adversarial standpoint, and to report back to me whether or not we're making the necessary progress in fixing those penetration points.
Let me ask a question about the cloud, and it was touched on earlier. People in Maine have approached me and say, why are we going to the cloud? You put everything in one place. Doesn't that increase vulnerability? You talked about the 3 different systems you saw in Afghanistan. One of the reasons our election system was not successfully attacked in 2018 is that it's so diffuse. It's state, local. Somebody described it as a hairball. It's very hard to penetrate. It seems to me if you have the cloud and everything's there, and I think you testified the single cloud will have all of the, from secret to compartmented. If it is penetrated, it's a bonanza for the adversary. Assure me that we're not making a large-scale mistake here by concentrating all of our assets in one place, hoping that it's entirely secure, but if it isn't, it's a disaster if it's penetrated.
Yes, sir. First, for a point of clarification, we are not putting all of our data onto a single cloud. Just for example, in the last 2 years alone, we have awarded 10 distinct cloud contracts. So first of all, we are not moving to a single cloud.
But isn't that the purpose of JEDI?
No, sir, that has never been the purpose of JEDI. JEDI was one of a multitude of clouds. We just issued a report to Congress last Thursday in which it states the fact that we are a multi-vendor, multi-cloud environment and will continue to be. JEDI is a unique capability that allows us to move between classification levels and put information out to the tactical edge, but it is not going to be, nor is it our only cloud today.
And you're confident that although JEDI will have this essential function, that it will be as secure as the multiple functions that we have now?
Yeah, I'd actually argue that today the way that we've set up our cloud environment in a very siloed, disconnected way has actually created more vulnerabilities, and by moving to this integrated enterprise approach, it will allow the likes of U.S. Cyber Command and NSA to help assure that the cloud environment is actually more secure, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Reid, do you have any further?
No, Mr. Chairman, just let me compliment the witnesses and thank you for their testimony.
And I agree with that. I appreciate very much the time you've taken, the family who's here with you. You're addressing something that is not talked about very often. And you are the right people for the job, and we appreciate what you're willing to do in further expanding your service to your country. Is there any other comment you'd like to make after going through this routine? Anything that you want to add that maybe wasn't said to your satisfaction?
Senator, nothing from me, but thank you for your time and your support and consideration.
Okay.
Just like to say thank you for your support, consideration, and thank you for elevating the authorities of the CIO office inside the Department of Defense.
That's a good way of putting it. Thank you.
I will echo my colleagues. I appreciate your consideration, the thoughtful nature of the questions today, and I would also like to thank this committee and the staff members in particular for all the hard work and support you've given the essentially startup within DOD called the CMO. We appreciate your support.
That's great. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.